Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 6:07. It's O'Connor and Company on our Kwanzaa extravaganza. We're celebrating right along with the Vice President of the United States, who has a long, long history celebrating Kwanzaa, as you know. Growing up as an Indian woman in Berkeley, just moments after Kwanzaa was invented. Joining us a little later in the program, also a big fan of Kwanzaa, he's Cal Thomas at 6:35, 7:05. Benham Ben Taleblu, he's with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. 7:35, Chuck Teese, D.C. political analyst. Give us a look-see on the year that was in Washington. 8:05, Sean Carney, 40 Days for Life. And at 8:35, Julio Rosas will join us. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
Are you ready for our hero of the year? You know, I know that Time Magazine has already selected their person of the year. That was T Swift, by the way. Did you see that?
Yes.
The Yoko Ono of the NFL.
That's right.
Have you? Real quickly, you know the Chiefs lost this weekend at home.
I did not know.
Then, of course you don't. And the final shot of the game was a dismayed Taylor Swift up in the family's box, looking on in horror as her husband. Oh, I'm sorry, her boyfriend.
Wow.
Boyfriend. Yeah, I accelerated
honestly,
things.
can I take a moment on Taylor Swift?
Sure.
Yeah, she's, 35 now?
Honestly, she could be 20. She could be 50.
She dresses like a 20-year-old.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
she kind
does.
of has this, cheerleader vibe going on. But it's interesting to me. It's like she's sort of I mean, maybe that's her brand.
That might
right?
be. Well, it's her target audience, yeah. So.
Yeah. She just dresses very young.
I have less issue with her dressing maybe younger than her age than I do Madonna doing it, all right?
Madonna's like 100 years old.
She's a grandma.
Yeah. Taylor Lorenz does this. You know, she's 65, and she also dresses very young.
Yes, I knew that about her.
She with the
All
Washington Post.
Meanwhile, let's move on. I know Taylor Swift was the person of the year, but I think the person of the year needs to be this employee for Delta Airlines. Yes. Who was caught on camera. Now, apparently what happened, this was 3 days before Christmas. It's at LaGuardia Airport in New York. And as you know, the toughest travel time in the universe. LaGuardia Airport on its own is already a nightmare all the time.
Yes.
Let alone, the Friday before Christmas.
Yeah.
And apparently there's a gate change problem. There's issues. And this Delta ticketing agent at the gate is trying to handle things. And this transgender Dylan Mulvaney female impersonator with a deeper voice than me.
Oh, yeah. And failed actor.
Failed actor. Now failed act. Well, maybe now semi-successful actress because if you're a failure as an actor, but then you throw a wig and a dress on, you've got a shot in this business, baby.
You get an Oscar.
Starts confronting this ticketing agent because they were misgendered. And let me just say, I'm looking at a publicity photo of this individual who tries to represent themselves as a woman. Yep. And I've got to think that in this publicity photo, every single possible effort was made to make this individual look as close to a woman as possible. And it's a dude, okay? And this is with lighting and makeup and all of the bells and whistles. Imagine 100%. This dude in a dress at a ticketing counter just trying to, on a frazzled travel day. You know the guy looks like a guy.
Yeah, and actually in the video, it sounds like a guy.
Yes, and so now listen to how this Delta agent calmly handles the situation.
What about when a Delta employee misgenders you intentionally?
While he's talking, you're talking.
You just misgendered me again.
Okay.
Multiple times.
Gotcha.
Both of you have.
Sorry. Wasn't intentional, but if you want to take it personal, that's also.
Well, she did do it intentionally.
All right, now I'm going to let it continue, but that's the first part of it that is so brilliant. It wasn't intentional, but if you want to take it that way, all right, that's your choice. I love that so much.
I am totally using that in my next fight with someone.
I hope Darren is listening and taking notes. There must be a counteroffensive. No, that's a great. I didn't mean it personally, but if you want to take it personally, that's your choice.
That's
you
your
go
choice.
for it. Yeah. But he's so calm about it. But then,
So calm.
But then he also recognizes that he is in a position of authority, and if he needs to exercise it, he will.
No, that's also.
Well, she did do it intentionally twice.
You're talking to me too.
You said she and then you said he.
You're being condescending, and if you want to continue, I have full authority to escort you out the building right this moment if you want to play that game with me.
Okay.
Would you like to continue 3 days before Christmas? I really don't mind.
I'm good. I'll just put this on.
Yeah, and at that moment, he puts his phone down and says, all right, fine, just get me on the plane.
Right, and also you have to also understand someone else is talking to this gate agent.
Yeah.
So he's got multiple customers up there asking him questions, and he's going back and forth, and so he's talking to a woman, and so think of this guy. It's LaGuardia. It's 3 days before Christmas. Everybody's got a problem, and he's trying to shuffle these people through, and he's not only got to like figure out how to help these people, he's then got to take a moment and go, oh. This guy who presents as a man, who looks like a man, and who sounds like an angry gay man, I've got to think about I've got to, take a moment to really think about calling him the right, gender of his choice. It's also just, it's so rude to treat these people like this at an airport who are trying to serve the public, to treat them like this. It's and again, I think these videos are done intentionally. I think they want to. We've seen those viral videos of the guy who goes to restaurants. He looks like a male in a woman's dress.
Yes,
and then he gets a waiter. Some of them don't even speak English fluently, and he traps them and scolds them and tis them. It's disgusting.
Here's the best part about it, though. By the way, because so this person in question, and I got to tell you something. I'm not there on the front lines at Delta Airlines in an airport having to deal with this person, but I've got to think that the ticket has the person's name on it, right? The person's name is Tommy Dorfman. But Tommy Dorfman presents as a girl.
And not well. He doesn't.
But not well.
What's called pass. He doesn't pass.
Yeah. No. So and then you're looking at the ticket and the person's name is Tommy. And not spelled like Tommy Lauren. No, it's Tommy, Tommy Dorfman, who up until about a minute and a half ago actually presented male to the world, but now has decided to present female and is now getting all upset and riled up because the gate agent looked at the ticket, said Tommy, and immediately said he or she, or honestly, I don't know.
Well, and by the way, now the trans activists are contacting Delta to get this guy fired.
Well, it's funny because Tommy Dorfman, the dude who presents as a woman who tried to trap this employee and get them fired, posted this on their TikTok in an attempt to, expose him and publicly shame him and get Delta. Yeah. And it backfired. And this is even in the world of TikTok. If you look at the people on TikTok responding to this, they're like, Tommy, you're the problem here. Dude, lighten up. This guy was professional. He was classy. If there's anyone at fault here, it's you. And you're right. But the small segment of activists are trying to put pressure on Delta. And when last we checked, Delta was bending over backwards to disavow the voters of Georgia for daring to want a voter ID when somebody shows up at the polls. So who knows what Delta will do here with their DEI geniuses running things.
Yeah. And honestly, don't forget, these trans activists are aggressive, they're loud. There's not many of them, but they are incredibly loud and often violent. We have plenty of evidence of them being violent and also towards women. So yeah, they'll try to bully Delta into ruining this man's life, who again was very civil.
Yes.
And at a busy time of year at the airport. So,
handled the problem beautifully. And we're supposed to be respectful of people we should always be respectful of people, but especially if you're working at an airline and it's the holiday season, you got to always extend them extra grace for the stress that they're under. And the problem in this entire scenario is Tommy Dorfman.
Yes.
Who, with a name like that, I'm shocked he didn't do well in the entertainment business.
Failed Hollywood actor.
Yes, and failed female impersonator. It's 6:15. While we're talking about those DEI attorneys that run and ruin everything at the same time, let's focus on a positive development at the hands of the lawyers, and that has to do with insurance companies, specifically malpractice insurance carriers, and how they are now reacting to the latest lawsuits over so-called gender-affirming care. Now, Julie, we've talked about this earlier in the year, that when hospitals start to recognize that it is cost prohibitive for them to mutilate young children and put them on chemical hormone therapy that alters their bodies forever, and even worse, suggests and employs surgical mutilation of their genitals for so-called gender reassignment surgery, or gender affirming surgery, they call it now, Orwellian as they are. As soon as the hospitals start to recognize that this is going to be a risk for them to do, and they're going to be losing money on it, that's going to make a difference. But to be precise, it's not the hospitals who determine it, it's the hospital's lawyers.
That's right.
And that's now a development that is very welcome indeed. Time Magazine reporting on how malpractice insurance prices are now so escalated because the latest gender reassignment malpractice lawsuits that have popped up.
Yes.
From detransitioners who said, my God, what did you do to me?
Yep.
And I'm going to sue your pants off. That now clinics are basically stopping the practice. They're unable to offer these life-altering procedures because they can't cover themselves with insurance.
That's right. And it's why people like Prisha Mosley, who IWF has featured extensively on our series called Identity Crisis, which is a must-watch, and Chloe Chol and many others. There's apparently, I think, 10 lawsuits now. It's so important that these people who were sort of brainwashed and convinced that the way in which they would feel better is to cut off their genitals or to alter their bodies, that they sue. These medical officials have got to be held accountable, or it will keep going. So, again, people need to realize some of these changes that we're seeing are because of these brave detransitioners who filed these lawsuits.
Yep. And I want to read, and because it's only happening in certain states right now, because, as you know, insurance regulations and premiums are on a state-by-state basis. And you still got these maniacal, demonic politicians like Gavin Newsom, who wants his state to be a sanctuary state for children to be able to leave their parents and not have parental permission and get these life-altering procedures over there on the West Coast. You need to hear how Time Magazine set up the story here. I'm going to read a little bit of it for you. After Iowa lawmakers passed a ban on gender-affirming care for minors in March, managers of an LGBTQ plus health clinic located just across the state line in Moline, Illinois, decided to start offering that care. So again, say, come across state lines. There used to be laws prohibiting minors crossing state lines, or adults taking minors across state lines for nefarious acts. The added services would provide care to patients who live in largely rural eastern Iowa, those redneck Christians, including some of the hundreds previously treated at a University of Iowa clinic, saving them half-day drives to clinics in larger cities like Chicago and Minneapolis. By June, the Project of the Quad Cities, as the Illinois clinic is called, had hired a provider who specializes in transgender health care. So Andy Rowe, the project's healthcare operations director, called the clinic's insurance broker to see about getting the new provider added to the nonprofit's malpractice policy. I didn't anticipate that it was going to be a big deal, Rowe said. Then the insurance carrier's quotes came in. The first one specifically excluded gender-affirming care for minors.
Wow.
The next response was the same, and the one after that. By early November, more than a dozen malpractice insurers declined to offer the clinic a policy.
Wow.
And that's huge.
It is
and
huge,
eventually, now California will actually pass a law forcing insurance carriers.
Of course, yes.
They must cover it.
This is a cat and mouse game.
Yep. But just so everyone's clear, in a state like New York, hell, a state like Maryland will probably do that too. That they will legislate that insurance carriers must provide coverage for this gender-affirming care for minors, and the only way insurance carriers can do that is to increase premiums on everyone.
That's right.
And you're all going to be paying for it, and everyone's health care costs will go up.
And if you doubt that this will happen, for instance, here in Virginia, don't forget Carl Frisch, who is on the Fairfax School Board. He was sworn in on a stack of books on pornography, on a stack of pornographic books, books pushing kiddie porn, pushing this sort of gender confusion on kids. So the officials that work with kids are pushing this stuff. The psychiatrists are pushing this stuff. The medical organizations are pushing this stuff. So again, this is a great story. That there's some hope that medical malpractice is not being offered for these things, so doctors can be sued and should be sued. But you're absolutely right that politicians will swoop in there and insist that this be covered. So again, it's cat and mouse. We got to keep it up. We got to keep working and making to protect these kids.
6:24 coming up. It's Cal Thomas time at 6:30. 6:36 now on O'Connor and Company. Coming up at 7:05, Benem Ben Taleblu from Foundation for Defense for Democracy's latest out of Israel. 7:35, Chuck Tees will give us a look-see in the rearview mirror on the year that was in D.C. politics. 8:05, Sean Carney, 40 Days for Life. And then at 8:35, Julio Rosas on the continuing debacle at the border. It's Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock, who's sounding better and better every minute that goes by. You're going to kick COVID's butt, Gunlock.
Oh, yeah.
Joining us now is Cal Thomas. Cal Thomas for his year-end special. He's dressed in his green velvet jacket, drinking a glass of champagne, ready to ring in the new year. Cal, Merry Christmas.
Well, welcome back, you two, and Happy Kwanzaa.
Thank you. And you have highlighted a story here which I think encapsulates 2023, the year that was. In Canada, it is now mandatory for tampons to be available in the men's room.
Yes, this is amazing stuff. Got to give credit to those Canadians. What did I say?
Canadian, absolutely.
They are really screwed up there, but we're close behind. We're trying to follow up. Clearly, this is political correctness run amok. Female products in men's restrooms. These are for the trans people. I filled out a form the other day for a doctor's office, and under gender, it had male or female, traditional, and then it had trans men, trans women, 3 or 4 other categories I hadn't heard before, and then other, just in case they missed one. I'd like to know what other is. Yeah. It's crazy up there.
Cal, I actually went to the doctor recently, and they had gender, and they just had a line for you to fill out, and I changed it. I crossed it out and put sex instead of gender. It's these words that they use so interchangeably, but it's not gender. It's
if
sex,
I had to fill out that form and it said sex with an empty blank, I'd be really.
When they used to say sex, I would put down yes.
Yeah. Frequently, please.
But Cal, I have a more serious question. I love your end of the year roundup, and you talk about the changes for the past 100 years. But NPR reported that this was the most unproductive Congress in decades, and they report it like it's bad news. Why is that? Yeah. I'd love you to explain to me why that isn't bad news.
Well, my view is that Congress should go home, and we'll call you when we need you. They've got almost a $34 trillion debt, which they're doing nothing about.
Right.
The border is not a border at all. We might as well annex Mexico, for heaven's sake. And they're not doing the things they need to do at all. And everybody knows what needs to be done. But, in Washington, if you solve a problem, you no longer have the issue. And they'd rather have the issue to run on than actually solve the problem. I mean, this business at the border is absolutely self-defeating and suicidal. There was a New York Post story a few days ago. They found this radical activist who's leading some of these marches to America. He was once sentenced to 40 years in prison. Obviously, he got out early. And he's bringing another 8,000 on a Christmas Eve march through Mexico, and maybe 15,000 following that. We can't live as a nation. We can't survive as a nation with that kind of approach. So Congress won't even uphold the laws that are already on the books, passed by both Democrat and Republican Congresses, and signed by both Democrat and Republican presidents. We are through as a nation if we can't control our borders and don't fix the debt. That's just a lesson of history.
Cal, a lot of people are sort of echoing the same sort of sentiment this week, which says, well, I'll be happy that 23 is over. Let's get on to the next year. I don't know about you. I'm sort of holding my breath about 2024. I feel like we're about to have a year unlike any other. Am I reading the tea leaves wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, from the trials of Trump to the uncertainty of who's going to be the nominee on both sides to a very weakened Joe Biden. Nobody, I mean, unless you're a completely in the tank for Joe Biden, how can anybody have faith that a man who would be 86 years old at the end of his second term and is already demonstrating very solid evidence of mental decline, be confident in him? You know, here's the thing: we need, I think, an upgrade in the way we select our presidents. I'm almost for going back to the old smoke-filled room. The major polls show that members of both parties don't want the candidates that are now appear to be the nominees. Well, if they don't want them, let's find somebody else. As JFK said in 1960, we can do better. Or as he said in his inaugural address, the torch has been passed to a new generation. It's not that just one person enables and embodies the values we care about. If you happen to be a Republican or conservative, there are several people running who believe in the same things that Donald Trump does, just without his baggage and without federal trials facing them in 2024.
Well, Cal, I mean, most people would think that you might see your wish come true this year in terms of the smoke-filled room, because most people don't think Joe Biden will be the nominee for the Democrats, but it's pretty much too late for them to have any kind of legitimate primary caucus process. So if it's not Joe Biden, the nominee for the Democrats, that means it's going to be decided at their convention.
Right.
That'll be pretty remarkable, considering they call themselves Democrats. It's a pretty undemocratic way to choose.
Well, you can change the rules. This is why they have rules committees. I've been to many of these conventions, and back in the 60s, of course, there were these controversies about seating the Mississippi delegation, which was all white. You may not be old enough to remember those, but there were debates on the floor. There were arrests made. Of course, the '68 convention in Chicago was chaotic. We might call it an insurrection today, but I think they could possibly change the rules. I don't know how they're going to get around Kamala Harris without being called racist and sexist. But I mean, we can do better. We just can.
They're Democrats, Cal. They're never called racist or sexist. Somehow they get away with it. All right, Cal.
Well,
hey, Happy New Year.
Thank you very much, and to you guys as well. We'll see you next year.
You bet. It's 6:43. Let's do a roundup of D.C. news here at the end of the year, because the stats are coming in, and it's awful. Again, breaking violent crime numbers year after year. It's a record-breaking government, this district council is. All the wrong records. And I want to remind you that at 7:35, Chuck Tease is going to join us to talk about how D.C. crime is absolutely out of control. But here's a perfect indication. In 2023, more restaurants closed than in the last 2 years. Because everyone said, oh, well, it's COVID, it's COVID.
Right,
no.
Right.
It's not. In 2021 and in 2022, the 2 years most impacted by the shutdown, by the lockdown, there were fewer restaurants that closed in D.C. than in 2023.
Yeah, and in fact, in 2023, more people went back to work.
That's right. No, The business conditions post-pandemic, 23 should have been a year of growth.
Yes.
In the restaurant business. In fact, it was the opposite. More restaurants closed in D.C. in 23 than in the previous 2 years. Also, fewer new restaurants opened than in 2022 and in 2021. So it was a dismal year, and it can only be a combination of the crime and other economic conditions. Because remember, D.C. keeps raising the minimum wage.
Yep.
And they keep raising taxes, and that drives rent up. And everyone says, oh, well, it's just corporate taxes. Well, okay, corporate taxes are the people who own the businesses, who own the restaurants, who own the commercial property for the restaurants. And some of these restaurants that have closed have been around for decades, and they just can't make it anymore in Washington, D.C.
It's just terrible what's happened to the city. And it doesn't look like there's any changes on the horizon.
Well, let me give you a perfect headline out of Washington City paper that will explain to you why it's not getting any better. One thing that we all hate about Washington, forgetting about the cost and the crime and the filth and all that stuff, is traffic cameras. I think everyone can agree that traffic cameras are a plague, right?
Yes.
I'm saying you're acting like you have
yes, I just
personal
Yes, my husband taped this to the coffee machine this morning. So at 4 a.m., I could see that I had gotten a ticket near the studio, by the way, courtesy of a traffic camera. $200.
There you go. See?
What the?
Well, and you're going to have to pay it, Julie, because you're white.
That's right. That's
No,
right.
and,
Yes.
and I know that
you're
seems
serious.
That seems weird, but here's Washington City paper. Black residents in D.C. are disproportionately impacted by traffic fines, with fewer opportunities to build wealth that would help them pay off the debts. So now there are plans to increase traffic cameras, but it needs to be shot through the lens of equity.
That's right.
So in other words, the D.C. Council is actually considering making different rules for people who get speed cameras if they're black.
I am
versus
all
if they're white.
for not having to pay these stupid fines.
How about we get rid of all the traffic cameras?
Yes.
Regardless of...
But not based on the color of your skin.
The brilliant people who brought you, no fines for jumping the fare at Metro
Right.
are now trying to, alleviate the racial equity problem with traffic cameras in Washington, D.C. And one other takeaway that I wish people would say out loud, because now apparently black residents in D.C. are being discriminated against by traffic cameras.
Yes.
So there's racial discrimination happening
Yes.
in Washington, D.C. from the government. That's
Right.
the only takeaway that's appropriate, right?
It must be that Republicans are in charge, Larry.
Well, exactly. Thank you. Democrats have dominated Washington, D.C. politics for what, 70 years? 80 years?
And hold on. Not just Washington. Maryland, Northern Virginia.
Of course.
The whole region is controlled by Democrats.
If Washington, D.C. has racist metro fare laws and traffic camera laws, could we at least identify? I mean, first of all, I refuse to say that traffic cameras are racist. I think they're just obscene in general, regardless of your skin color.
Yeah.
But if we have to make this a racial issue, could
Fine.
we add to the, or forget about adding to the bottom of the article?
Charge for the last 200 years.
Lead the article with Democrat-controlled Washington, D.C.
Yes.
is disproportionately harming black residents.
That's right.
Could we at
That's
least
right.
add that to the column, Washington
They
City
always
paper?
leave that out of these urban areas that are falling apart.
It's 6:52. Coming up, it's time for our big 7 o'clock hour here on this Wednesday, 27th day of December. We'll kick things off with a discussion of the latest out of Israel and the strikes from Israel against their terrorist enemies. We'll give you all the details. Plus, Chuck Tease is going to join us on a year that was in D.C. that is lamentable, regrettable, and sadly will probably be repeated in 2024. Keep it here. It's O'Connor and Company.